Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into a truly fascinating and honestly pretty provocative theory from a text called Space and Hatred by an author named Su Feng. We're going to explore a really primal concept here, the idea that the sheer physical space around us might actually dictate our most fundamental and sometimes our darkest behaviors. Get ready because this is a deep dive that's going to totally challenge how we view human nature and how we interact with one another.
So, to really get where the author is coming from, we have to start with a completely shocking conversation he actually overheard right after the SARS epidemic. A woman in her 30s, seemingly out of nowhere, just casually remarked, "How did this SARS just pass by? It would have been better if it had wiped out a few billion people." I mean, wow, right? When the author asked her why she would ever say something so incredibly dark, her justification was chillingly simple. She just said, "There are too many people. How can we survive?" And the author actually uses this exact jarring moment to frame his entire theory.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Nature's Overcrowding Response. The author's core premise here is that limited space inevitably generates unavoidable hatred. Now, what's super interesting is how he illustrates this spatial theory at the micro level using something as simple as a chicken coop. Imagine a coop meant to accommodate 10 chickens. If you just keep 5 or 6 in there, you get perfect harmony. They get along fine, it's totally peaceful. But the moment you cross that threshold and squeeze more than 10 chickens into that exact same physical space, that harmony instantly flips into brutal, violent conflict. The actual nature of the chickens didn't magically change. Literally only the available space did.
And he argues this is a universal biological law. It's definitely not just a poultry thing. Overcrowded mice, they'll fight constantly in their nests. If you cram too many bees into a hive, it triggers a split and a new queen takes half the colony away. He even applies this directly to us, to human families. As a household grows too large for its walls, complaints and quarrels inevitably kick off, which triggers a natural division of the family. Across all species, space dictates peace.
Which brings us to Section 2, the human space crisis. Let's think about this for a second. Bees can split their hives, and human families can divide their households to find new space. But what happens when humanity as a whole simply runs out of space to expand into?
Well, let's look at the global scale. The author points out a staggering number. Even at the time of his writing, Earth already held 6.5 billion people. And while he notes we haven't hit the absolute breaking point of mutual destruction just yet, this cramped global space is already causing an indescribable mounting oppression. It's basically a giant pressure cooker, affecting powerful governments and everyday citizens alike.
And he connects this massive global pressure right back to our individual lives. He points out that in highly populous countries, like China, for example, this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. A cruel fight for survival space is thrust upon people starting from early childhood. That fierce competition for resources kicks off almost as soon as you can walk. And that is exactly why, according to the author, the woman we talked about earlier made that dark wish about SARS. She was simply reacting to a lifetime of intense, inescapable spatial pressure.
So, Section 3, a vicious survival cycle. The text argues that we actually have to look at this mechanically, completely stepping back from our usual ethical judgments of good and evil. It's a raw instinct.
And this brilliant, albeit tragic, 4-step cycle shows us exactly how this works. Step 1, everyone has a totally innocent, natural desire for a better life. Makes perfect sense, right? Step 2, to actually achieve that better life, we inevitably end up plundering resources and occupying more space. Step 3, all this consumption leads to severe environmental pollution of our water, land, and air. And finally, Step 4, that pollution destroys habitable areas, shrinking our available living space even further, which just makes the competition for survival even fiercer and more brutal. It's a continuous, accelerating feedback loop.
The real warning here is that humanity has to find a conscious solution, because if we don't, nature is going to step in and act mechanically. The author claims nature will simply impose catastrophic events. We're talking plagues, wars, famine, major disasters like earthquakes and floods, just to forcefully correct the population balance. And these natural horrors will happen right alongside human crimes, robbery, kidnapping, murder. To the author, none of this is a moral punishment. It's literally just nature resetting the spatial balance.
Moving on to Section 4, the forced purification concept. Now the author goes a bit further here, moving from natural biology into a highly esoteric, subjective concept. Let's objectively explore what he means by this alternative intervention.
To explain this, he shares a super vivid, personal story about his dog, Larry. So Larry mated with a neighbor's dog and ended up having 11 puppies. Now initially, having a dozen dogs running around his yard brought incredible joy and vitality. It was awesome. But as they grew up, the spatial limits of that yard were heavily tested, and it quickly escalated into total chaos. The dogs fought over food, they ruined the yard, they got fiercely jealous, and they even started biting each other just to win his attention. So he had to take action. With 12 dogs total, there was absolute chaos. They were biting each other, terrifying people walking by the gate, so he gave away 6 of them. But even with just 6 dogs left, the problems were still there. The yard was simply still over capacity. Finally, he gave away a few more until only 3 dogs remained. And suddenly, peace was completely restored to the yard. The physical space finally matched the biological load perfectly.
And here is the crucial takeaway. Regarding those puppies, he writes, "I was forced to implement a forced purification." Now, obviously, the dogs couldn't possibly understand why they were being removed from the yard, but the author, acting as the quote-unquote creator of that specific space, knew he had to intervene to maintain order. He uses this as a direct, really provocative metaphor for divine intervention on Earth. If humans overpopulate and completely destroy our yard, he theorizes that a higher power will step in and do exactly what he did to those dogs.
Section 5. Escaping the narrow space. This brings us to the ultimate crossroads in his theory. Unlike animals, we actually have a choice.
The warning here is crystal clear. On one hand, we have the animalistic approach, taking highly individualistic actions, acting entirely on our own blind instincts, and completely ignoring the whole. If we calculate only for our own little part of the world, the text argues a cosmic forced purification is absolutely inevitable. But on the other hand, we have the rational human approach, actually foreseeing these crises before they hit a critical mass, and planning for the global whole.
So, what exactly is the author's ideal solution to all this? Well, he presents something called the Lifechanyuan theory. This is his proposed framework for humanity to live and produce in a way that avoids mutual, space-induced hatred altogether. But it's really important to note his own deep skepticism here. He neutrally admits that expecting the entire globe to seamlessly adopt this theory is, well, likely wishful thinking, a total fantasy, or even a complete delusion.
Which brings us to a highly provocative question drawn directly from the text's conclusion. If a global utopian shift really is a delusion, what do we actually do? The author asks, can we lead those who understand out of the narrow space of competition, or are we simply leaving our future to fate? It is a striking thought to end on. I really want you to reflect on your own competitive environments, whether that's at work, in a crowded city, or on a global scale. How much of our behavior, our stress, and our conflicts are simply a mechanical reaction to the physical space we have left? Think about that, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.